Somebody is asking, the original seeds that God created, do you have access to it? No. Enter forest, no need to buy. Enter deep forest where they say gods them they live, the gods are living. Enter those forests, you will see it. But I am telling you for free, you cannot eat it, because they are not in the form that you can eat it. They are not in the form that you can consume it. That's the point.
Hello, you're welcome back to the channel STEAM Agriculturist TV. Don't forget, STEAM stands for Science, Technology, Engineering, Agricultural, Mathematics. Today I'll be talking about GMO, which means genetically modified seeds. A lot of things have been going on online. A lot of people have come out to talk about GMO. Some say GMO is good for consumption and is healthy. Some others say they don't know at which extent, to what extent GMO can cause any health implication. So the question is this.
From the science, we must become people that understand, is this ethically okay or is this politically inspired? You need to do that. As educated people, these are the kind of questions we need to ask. There was a big fight between the US and China over that phone called Huawei, I don't know how they pronounce it. That their Huawei phone that was going to go into 5G. What was the cause? There was no other reason except the fact that that was a political fight because of economic gains. It is that simple.
A coalition of Nigeria's agricultural research system, led by the Agricultural Research Council of Nigeria, maintains that genetically modified crops are safe and pose no harm to humans, animals, and the environment. The group, comprising of National Biotechnology Research and Development Agency, the National Agricultural Seed Council, the National Agricultural Quarantine Service, Shedder Science and Technology Complex, and the National Biosafety Management Agency, the government focal agency for the regulation of GMOs, unanimously affirmed that the safety and benefits of genetically modified crops is immeasurable. The coalition's position comes on the heels of the recent media campaign against GM technology in the country. Speaking at a news conference in Abuja, the researchers explained that the GMOs continue to serve as a tool towards the realization of food security.
The telomeres that recently sparked intense controversy and concerns, with many questioning its safety and environmental impact, is a transgenic, drought-tolerant and insect-protected maize variety designed to thrive in challenging climatic conditions. Its commercial release is expected to enhance food security in sub-Saharan Africa by increasing crop yield, enhancing resilience to pests and diseases, and reducing the environmental impact. Also, improving nutritional content for the health benefit of the populace.
Thank you, Mr. Okon. Hybridization, yes. What then is GMO? Engineer Dan, Happy New Year. What then is a GMO, genetically modified? First, understand that for us to form a GMO, there will be two organisms of different species. First, different species. Remember, in hybrid, two organisms, the same species. Whether you are taking German Shepherd and Shepherd German, I don't know the names of dog, they are both dogs. But in GMO, you are first starting with organisms of different species. Just imagine, keyword, imagine, before people will start preaching again later. Imagine that you are having a man and a goat having intercourse, just an example. Now, these are different species. This is where we now start saying GMO if we were doing it at the gene level. Now, how does GMO work? In the case of GMO, you have, let me look for something else. Just a minute, I'm trying to find anything else to use. So let's say this is a remote, this is a biro, two different things entirely. there is something, I'll come back to that to improve variety, because I don't want to confuse us. This is a remote. Let's say this remote is, these two things are animals or plants, whatever it is. There is something I want to improve or remove or add to this thing. But the only place I am seeing the gene that can express that thing I want to do is not found in any other kind of remote. So I have different types of remote which are all the same species, but no other remote has that gene that can express what I am trying to do. But I found a biro. That has the gene that I need to do that thing I want to do in the remote. So when I take the gene from this biro and bring into this remote, that is genetic manipulation.
Well, we're getting into that big debate about GMOs, genetically modified organisms. You recall the recent approval of maize seed for planting and the rest. That has gotten a lot of people talking, and then they realize that, oh, it's not just that, there's a lot more. But then there's been a lot of back and forth. Well, it's good, it's the way forward. This reduces, the prevalence of, let me just hold my horses and invite the expert here on the show this morning. We're joined by Professor Celestine Agworu, President, Nigeria Biotech and Biosafety Consortium, Dean, College of Biological Sciences, Federal University of Agriculture, Benue State. He joins us live from our Kano studio. Good morning, Prof. Welcome to the Morning Brief.
Good morning, and thank you for having me on Morning Brief.
Well, great to have you. I was going to get into all of the controversies, but then I just reminded myself, you're not the expert here. Let us speak with the expert. So GMO, that is a buzz term that gets a lot of people worried because they hear GMO and naturally you think of all of the extreme cases. Wait a minute, this is not real in some sense. There's been some modification of what I am putting into my body, and people have tagged it as causing cancer, some genetic issues and the rest. So let's just start from the basics. What are GMOs? Why do we have GMOs in the first place? Why don't we just leave our plants and our foods the way God created them?
Oh, thank you very much. Genetically modified organisms are organisms equipped with what ordinarily they shouldn't have, to be able to survive adverse conditions or improve their quality. Genetic engineering is not applied to only agriculture. It's applied to, there's environmental biotech, that is genetic engineering is called the modern biotechnology. There's the environmental biotechnology, the health biotechnology, and then the agricultural biotechnology. Now, I guess that some of you in the studio, they would have taken the alpha interferon hepatitis B vaccine. And some who may be diabetic are also taking insulin. All of them are products of genetic engineering. And so there's no much debate about that. Where we have a lot of debate is on agricultural biotechnology. And how do that come in? A lot of people today even go ahead to call the normal hybrids that we have, which came in through the traditional breeding processes. Because of the way the products look, they call it GMOs. No, they are not. The moment you see that, you know that the person is ignorant. By the way, The Nigeria Biotechnology and Biosafety Consortium is a consortium of experts in the area of biotechnology and in the area of biosafety. And we came into being so that any person who is confused, who has a question, should be able to approach us, and we give clear and accurate information on any product of genetic engineering that the person is in doubt of. Now, there is this debate from the beginning about GMO, because possibly the first set were genetically engineered to survive application of pesticides. But it's not only that. An organism could be engineered to survive pesticides, resist pests. Where that is done, you will not need to apply the pesticides that you needed ordinarily to protect that plant. You can engineer to take care of micro hunger by improving the quality of the crop. And this is usually done by experts. They are not done. Now, I can see the picture that you have on your television. The moment you see someone carrying a needle and then holding a plant and injecting something into it and say that is how GMOs are produced, you know that the person does not actually know the procedures and the person is ignorant. And for us as experts, we started from around 2012 when we held the first conference in Benue, calling the attention of government that the world is leaving us behind. We need a specialist regulatory body to look at issues of biosafety and biosecurity for Nigeria, which GMOs are part of. And we are grateful to the then governor of Benue State, His Excellency Right Honorable Dr. Gabriel Chowasoswan, who provided the funds. We held that, and then we made a call to the government. Little did we know that even the biosafety unit of the Federal Ministry of Environment was also making efforts for it to be transformed to an agency, which we have today, that is regulating the practice of modern biotechnology in Nigeria. And we are here. I can assure you that there is no link between any genetically modified crop and cancer or any of those things that people are raising. This is a specialist area. It's not an area where people with tangential knowledge should be recruited into to begin to propagate things that are not real. We have enough
if I'm a button,
qualified experts in this country who are into research, not just here, including Nigerians in the diaspora.
If I'm a button,
we have two expert societies in Nigeria, the Biotechnology Society of Nigeria and the Genetic Society of Nigeria. We have critical mass of experts, in these two societies, that if any person is in doubt, will call from those places. In Nigerian universities, we have experts too. In my own university, we have a sequencing laboratory, and we are training people there.
All right, Prof, if you can hear me, if I'm a button, Prof, if you can hear me.
Foreign genes in any organism.
All right, you had mentioned that there is no proof and all of that, but we've heard scientists say that no matter how well-intended a drug is, let me use the word drug. The reason I use that word drug is based on chemicals now used to produce drugs. Even if it's pain relievers and all of that, it still has side effects. So it's difficult to understand and accept, even for lay people, that an organism or a plant or a crop will be genetically modified and there are no effects. Is it really true that there are no effects?
As I speak to you now, there is no such effect. Now, this modification that we are talking about is not that you pick a chemical and inject into a crop. What is it? I am breeding a plant, whether traditionally through the classical breeding or through molecular breeding. Let's take, for instance, the cowpea, which first generated all the issues that we have. Cowpeas has been bred to resist striga, the weed striga, through molecular means. Then the maruca that was affecting it. Every effort has been made to deal with it, including the use of chemicals, and it was not working. And then scientists, having understood what DNA is, that modifying the genetic makeup could make that plant to resist the maruca that affected. That was done. And it's like any other plant. The first thing that is tested is the gene of insert. Does it have any negative effect on this plant? That is checked and confirmed no. The protein which helps the plant to resist the maruca pest, does it have any side effect? Is it allogenic? All those tests are done from beginning to the end. And then the food quality is compared with the one that has not been genetically engineered. And when this is done, it is even put back for the traditional classical breeders to monitor the agronomic traits before it gets to the point of commercialization. Now, what happens? If you were using 10 liters of pesticide to control maruca, the moment you use the genetically modified one, which could now resist the pest, you use less than a liter or 1 liter of it. That protects the environment. So I don't know where this fear is coming from.
Prof.
In fact,
I'm wondering whether if this lack of link between GMOs to cancer and all the other concerns is really due to evidence suggesting that there is none, or lack of evidence because the players in the industry have refused to embark on that search for evidence because of the potential for commerce that they can benefit from. But do you also, I'd like you to respond to that, and do you also rule out worries published by health websites about, the possibility of allergies due to the consumption of genetically modified organisms, because you are consuming something which DNA has been altered? Apart from that, a loss of harvest because GMO crops are resistant to herbicides, and all the other worries as well in that mix. There's also, the potential damage of GMOs to honeybees.
No. Now, that is part of what is checked. Does the gene of insert and the protein synthesized at the end of the day, do they affect non-target organisms? All these are taken care of before any person could think of bringing out any product of genetic engineering. Now, like I said, there is no link. We are searching for the link also, and there is none as we speak today between GMOs and the cancer that people talk about. There's no such evidence. Secondly, the moment if a crop is genetically modified to resist a pest or a disease, you no longer need to apply the pesticide that originally you used to. And that reduces the pesticide residue there, that reduces the pesticide that you put into the environment. Eating the normal hybrid that you apply pesticides to. Any person who tells you that GMO cannot be grown organically is ignorant.
So if given an organically grown food or a GMO that is organically grown, which would you choose?
I will choose the one that is available. If it's GMO that is available, I'll choose.
Well, that's not the answer to my question.
And if you give me the two
let me now follow up.
Let me tell you.
Let me follow up, Prof. If you would allow me.
I will take the GMO.
Let me follow up if you would allow me. Despite your argument and the argument of so many advocates for the growing of genetically modified food crops, in the global north, in
Sorry,
shops,
let me get you, please.
Yeah, despite the argument that you put forward and the similar ones put forward by other advocates for GMOs, in Western countries, there is, standardization to the effect that food crops that are genetically modified are labeled. Would that also be, should Nigeria also be towing that path now that it is allowing genetically modified food crops into our, agricultural development, to give Nigerians a choice about whether or not they would consume GMOs or they would choose organically grown foods?
Even the National Biosafety Management Agency has a regulation on that. And that is what the experts are talking about. We have a specialist agency that regulates the practice of this, whether look at all the safety features. There is a regulation on that. If that agency that Nigeria has set up, which we should trust, decides to say, look, if you have an oil, because we are talking as if these foods are not processed. If you have an oil that you get from a crop that is genetically modified in your biscuit, label the biscuit as having part of its component as a GMO, so be it. So be it.
Prof, as we're beginning to wind down, Prof, just a quick question. Are the scientists like you considering in these modifications that we're talking about helping to reduce the prevalence or escalation of certain diseases in the human body organically? Is that part of the conversation?
Reducing what? I didn't get that.
Certain foods, certain things predispose people. Is there a way these GMOs can also help to reduce this predisposition of human bodies through the modification that is done on agricultural products so that we don't have maybe the prevalence of certain kinds of diseases? I'm just broadly asking that question since you guys believe in it a lot and you're working hard to make sure that we get as much value as far as GMOs are concerned. Because at the end of the day, Africa is burdened with disease, and if there's a modification that can help reduce that prevalence or reduce the predisposition, I think is welcome. Is that conversation on the table?
Yes, that conversation is on the table. I've mentioned its application in medicine and health, which nobody is arguing about. Now, there is the issue of the micro-hunger, which some of the available food we have do not have certain nutrients. If our crops are engineered to be able to generate those nutrients, especially the ones that are easily available, which could deal with those micro-hunger, that discussion is on the table, and it is welcomed. And scientists are working towards that. You see, let me make this point, since you say we're winding down. Science is not voodoo. Science is not magic. For those who come up, who don't have knowledge of what we are discussing, who have tangential knowledge or what I may call pedestrian in the area, jumping in to make far-reaching statements is actually unnecessary.
Right.
They are not helping Nigerians. Science of genetic engineering is not what you learn in 24 hours. Or you just go and pick one textbook and say I have become a biotechnologist.
Well, Prof.
People went through training, look at the safety lines. For me, as far back as 2012, to say, look, the issue of genetic engineering cannot be regulated by a body like NAFDAC, SON, and all the rest of them.
Right.
That Nigeria requires a specialist body made up of experts to
Well,
be
Prof,
able to deal with that.
we have to run now, and that's why we brought you.
Now, did I say our city, the white means God has failed? That was not what I said, though. I never said God has failed, though. Please quote me right. If you quote me, I will always accept. Any other question before I round up in another few minutes? Thank you so much for joining. Hope I was able to explain in simple terms what is it called this? Another question. Again, listening to what I said, Recital Farm, I never said whether GMO is good or bad. I only talked about the science. Why is there a fight? Monsanto is not the only GMO company. Monsanto is just not. Let me give you an example. Do you of us know a company called Syngenta? Some of us have heard of a company called Syngenta. They're a company in Nigeria. Syngenta sells GMO seeds locally. It's not a secret. They are a GMO seed seller. There's a company called Syngenta. There are lots of them. Why is there a fight against Monsanto? Because they are dominating. Let me give you another example. Thank God there's somebody that said this from the US. Sometimes, I think it was last year, so I don't know if you would remember Mr. Akin Taiwo. Sometimes last year, Mark Zuckerberg, the owner of Facebook, the owner of, there were like 2 or 3 that were taken to the House of the Senate because they were telling them that they are killing Amazon. The owner of Amazon, what's that guy's name now? Jeff Bezos. They were carrying all of them that every other company that comes up like theirs, that they come back and kill them. Now, why were they fighting them? Because they are saying that you are not allowing for competition. You are becoming so big that you are killing competition. So you must differentiate, is this fight a fight of science, an economic fight, a political fight, or an ethical fight? What are they really fighting? Don't follow what is marked like. Ask yourself, what are they really fighting? What is the issue? Does that make any sense? That is what I'm trying to explain. Don't just say, they say, this is banned. What is the underlying factor of the ban? What are they really against that is causing the ban? That should be the key question. Not is it good or bad. No. Good or bad is ethics. And if you want to know the ethical truth, you cannot get ethical truth from somebody that has an economic gain to make. Very important. Thank you. The fight is about food sovereignty, not climate change. Food sovereignty, because if they are able to dominate the US market, it would mean that every seed would now be, they are going to be the ones selling the seed. They will extend to selling the herbicide, extend to selling the nutrient over time, which means they will now dominate the food system. That is the fight. You need to understand that. It's like, what's the name of this company? Purdue. There's another one I'm trying to remember. Let me see if I can find their name. I'm trying to remember their name. Can't remember. Cargill. When we are done, go and learn. We cannot say climate change is the basics. No, is that food sovereignty? What are they doing against climate change? That's the real question you should ask. Go and read about Cargill. I will not talk about them. Go and read about Cargill. Bayer does GMO. Are they not in Nigeria? I think they've left Nigeria now, but they were in Nigeria. Go and read about Cargill, Cargill. Some of us have probably never even heard of them. Go and read about them. You will be impressed and amazed at what you will see. If this was like a regular normal one-on-one class that is not online, there are things that we could talk about, but go read about them. Any other question?
Colleagues, you have been poisoned. According to the science, anywhere from 25 to 80% of us has the weed killer Roundup in our bodies, without our knowledge and without our consent. Study after study has described Monsanto and Bayer's weed killer as chronically toxic, probably carcinogenic, linked to liver cancer, diabetes and cardiovascular disease, and likely to kill 93% of endangered species. Even the report that the Commission uses to justify its continued use says that Roundup carries a high long-term risk to mammals. That means us. We have one chance now to get this crap off our shelves. Zero tolerance. We must kill Roundup before it kills nature and takes us along with it. Thank you.
GMO is being created is for political and economic gain, to monopolize farmers, to take charge and control of what you eat. And I will tell you for free, as an agricultural literature secondary scientist, I will tell you this for free, that GMO is bad to the health. Any seed that is not an organic seed contains 34 to 38% of chemical deposition in that seed. And you could imagine what kind of damage such seed would do to your body. GMO seed, hybrid seed, they are all genetically modified. The difference is that one is between organisms of the same species, which is hybrid, while the other is between organisms of different species. But the question is this. The big question is this. Is there any form of chemical deposition or during the process of bringing the genes from one organism to the other organism, or from one organism of the same species to another organism of the same species? The question is this: when bringing the gene and introducing it to this seed, what form of chemicals are used? Is it done naturally or is done in the lab? If it is done in the lab, then know you that there is a percentage of within 34 to 38% of chemical deposition in that seed. There is a lot of chemical deposition.
But just before you take that meal, you might want to have a sit down, listen to this conversation. We're talking about GMOs. Well, we're breaking it down to the category of food, genetically modified plants, seeds, and the rest. Yesterday, we had a conversation with a professor who spoke in favor of GMOs and essentially gave his own insights from science into this. But this morning, we're given a balance to it, and we're being joined by Professor Christopher Amoah. Is Executive Director, Center for Food Safety and Agricultural Research, CEFSA, is right here with us in our Lagos studio. Good morning, Prof. Welcome to the Morning Brief.
Good morning.
Let's get right into it. We have a lot to cover. So it's been said, and this is a basic, that at some point everybody has had some GMO anyway. So why are you raising issues now when some meal, some fruit? The Prof yesterday gave the example of banana. That the original banana has seeds in it, but what we're eating right now does not have that seed. So let's start from there. it has been said that we've all had some GMO. So what's the point?
First and foremost, let's clarify the difference between GMO and hybridization.
Good.
So naturally, in the natural environment, plants, crops hybridize. It's a natural process, an environmental process. So the confusion the prof, I guess, must have been infusing is the confusion of mixing up hybridization and genetic modification. Hybridization happens in the natural, either through the natural evolutionary process or by farmers, breeders who align with the natural processes to aid the crops, the plants to hybridize. And that could be the reason you see some of these plants over the years changing in their nature. Now, the argument that everyone must have eaten GMO at some point in time, so why are we raising the alarm now, is untenable. Clearly, when I was growing up, several years back, some of these ailments that we see today were not here. The question is, where are they coming from? Perhaps from those modifications. Because essentially, everyone is what he or she eats. This mass of body didn't just come in a day. It came from the process of biochemical change of the food I ate into the tissue, the anatomy that you can see now. So, I give you a classic example. If it is true that everyone must have eaten GMO at a point in time, that explains clearly why we should interrogate the impact of GMOs, because they have been around and we have seen some consequences. And that's why we're asking questions. And I think everybody who eats food should ask those questions. And people should stop demonizing or criminalizing those who ask questions. Because we see a movement, a trend that seeks to take absolute control of the human person to the extent that you give me something to eat and I don't have any right to even question what I'm eating. That's unfair.
The prof said yesterday, because I asked him, either me or one of my colleagues, I did ask, I said, look, the future, as far as GMO is concerned, I said, look, his argument is there's no scientifically proven data that shows that GMO cause cancer and all of that. So is this a question of scientific scholarship imbroglio, or there is actually something that we can look at and say, this supports these facts?
Both ends are tenable. You see, scientifically, there are hundreds of, I'm a scientist. I'm a professor of bioinorganic chemistry. And there are hundreds, tons of scientific publications proven in established journals, proving the relationship, negative of course, of the impact of GMOs on human or animal health. Because some of the studies are done on animals, and some are observatory, some are meta-studies, something we call meta-analysis. So when you take a population and you look at the impact of the certain kind of thing they've been ingesting, and you can draw up inferences. So there are tons of reports on that. Then secondly, you say this is food. This is food. There's something naturally everybody knows, it's called food poisoning. If you ate something, some pudding, or you ate something about 8 hours ago, and then your system begins to respond, you don't need me to go to the laboratory to tell you that you should find out what is causing that. And we have seen, there is a very popular report by Professor Arlini in Italy, who demonstrated how they ingest feeding rats. Because, you know, in animal studies, we look at those species that have similarities with the humans, and rats are like that. Now, these things cause testicular tumors. They caused cancers in those rats. Genetically modified maize was fed those animals, and it caused cancers. And again, in science, we are also looking at the food chain. We've interrogated the food chain. There is this group of chemicals. I'm traditionally a chemist, moved into bioinorganic chemistry and into experimental medicine. Now, we have observed that, for example, a chemical, a herbicide known as atrazine, which was very fondly used around our environments, was causing a change of sex in amphibians, in frogs, in waters. Because, you know, when farmers apply these things, the crops that we eat are produced by plants that are known as vascular plants. That means they uptake, they have vasculature, like we have veins and arteries in our bodies. So when these things are applied, and these genetically modified organisms come with herbicides, pesticides, because mind you, it's the same companies that are producing both. The companies like Monsanto, sorry to call the name, a company that was producing herbicides suddenly transformed into producing genetically GMOs. Now, we are also seeing the process of genetic modification incorporates some herbicides. That's why you have like a popular market name herbicide that is very popular across Africa. In Nigeria, is very popular. From Benue, where I come from and I work, I see a lot of farmers use it. Go to the market, it's everywhere. Now, that chemical, that herbicide is called Roundup. And that herbicide is incorporated in the modification of some of those crops that are pushed to the market for commercial planting. They are called RR soy or RR maize or Roundup ready. That means these crops can withstand Roundup. That occasions farmers to apply Roundup at liberty to the fields, because before now, let me give you a story. Before now, this company that was producing this chemical, this herbicide, was selling, and the major markets were here in Africa. But something happened because of the something we call scientifically phytotoxicity. These chemicals are toxic to the phytochemistry of the phytophysiology of the crop, of the plant. Now, these chemicals were also adversely affecting the crops, the plants. And farmers were experiencing some adverse effects, some of the crops dying together with the weeds. So these companies now came up with modifying the crops so that they can withstand the impact, the effect of those herbicides. Now farmers are at liberty to apply those herbicides freely without fear of harming their crops. And what that means is that more herbicides are pumped into the environment, unlike when I was growing up, that my parents and myself, when I was being taught how to farm, because Benue is the food basket of Nigeria. And we all farm. Every household in Benue is a farming household. So we used to pull out weeds, but now go to Benue, everybody is applying, pumping chemicals. And now what that means is that environmentally, when rain falls, there is runoff, there is wash down. And some of these residues are run off into surface waters, and some of them seep into groundwaters. And then it ends up in human bodies because people drink those things, and some of it is absorbed and retained, persists in the vasculature or even in the anatomy or the structure of the seed crops. Well, so people eat those things, and these adverse effects are being experienced. If you go to the hospitals now, you see the graph is climbing. Juvenile diabetes, before now, diabetes type 2 was not a disease of children. Before now, hypertension was not a disease of children, but it's rampant now. Where is it coming from?
Our guest yesterday did justify the application of those herbicides to, some GMO crops that are resistant to it. I can't remember in the exact same words that he used now. I'd have loved you to respond to that. But more importantly, you are talking about the emergence of certain diseases that we didn't have before.
Yeah.
And that was, formed part of the crux of our conversation yesterday. Despite the very real concerns about the possibility of some of these diseases being linked to the development and the introduction of GMO crops to our agricultural sectors, there still is very little evidence to prove it. So why are scientific researches few and far between that would link the concern about the relationship between these diseases and GMO crops?
I'm sorry, I have to correct you.
Go ahead.
The evidence is everywhere. The papers are there. I'm a scientist. I deal with them, I publish, I research, and in researching, we do literature review. We don't just jump into the laboratory to begin to investigate. We look at previous investigations and see where there are gaps, see where we need to improve. So the evidence, the publications are plenty there. If it was the right forum, I could reel them out to you. And then secondly, research is ongoing. But you see, in the scientific...
So, pardon me, sir. So for instance, for the Roundup corn now that is emerging, what is the scientific research to prove that the consumption of that is related to any type of cancer? And indeed, you can also talk about other GMO crops, for instance, the tomato and allergies, cancer.
In the corn you mentioned, I already mentioned the research in Italy. There are also researches in Argentina, in Southern America. Now, this research proved directly that these things have a direct link with cancers. Now, there is also many researches with respect to some of these ingredients, some of these chemicals, some of these processes that are used in genetic modification. I just mentioned one to you. Now, you insert pesticides. These are chemicals which we know traditionally that are toxic. We know them as toxic. But let me say this. You see, there is this argument that this particular, for example, Teller maize that is released for commercial planting in Nigeria, where is the research? There are two factors that work against research. Number one, we, the researchers, are asking the federal government authorities, because we are patriotic, where is the research that proved that this thing is safe before you approved it for commercial proliferation? So you see, let's not put the cart before the horse. That research, first of all, should be done by the one who's introducing it to prove to the consumer, because we're talking consumer protection now, to prove to the consumer that this thing is safe. Now they are saying, yes, it is safe, but you see, the second issue is that the proprietary companies that are pushing these organisms say that these are trade secrets. We can't reveal them to you. They are trade secrets.
Really?
Yeah, that's what they say all over the world. They say
the research that proves that
yes, because number one, I need a sample of this Teller maize. Right now, I have not accessed it until I will surreptitiously go and disguise as a farmer to go and collect it where they are distributing them. Then I will go and run them. But before I run them, people would have, people would have started consuming them. So the first thing to do scientifically is for the agency regulating this to demand for this information from the manufacturer, because these are patented seeds. These are patented technology. Somebody worked on them. So this agency ought to have requested for this. That's first. Secondly, this agency ought to have made this report, this information available to Nigerian consumers.
Wow. That's a list they should do,
that's
right?
The list.
Put everybody to know, let us know what research or data backs the safety. But I want to backtrack a bit, because they say if it's not broken, why fix it? So do we have a problem really with growing crops with yield such that we're now, requesting or bringing in what is called hybrid or genetically modified crops? Do we have a problem with agriculture in Nigeria?
Yes and no. I like that question. I reiterate, I come from Benue State, the food basket of Nigeria. Over the years, beginning from around 2009, something unique began to happen in this country and in some African countries. Food production centers began to be attacked in the name of banditry, insurgency, or whatsoever. Now, automatically, that impinged on yields because farmers are killed. If you'll observe, it's not the people in the commercial centers that have been attacked. Rarely are they attacked. It is the farmers. And this prompts up the possibility of a hidden agenda that is being unrolled. Now, you observe that farmers are killed, farmers are being chased out of their farming areas, and automatically, what would you expect the next harvest season? The farms are not tended. The quote and unquote, the cattle come in, eat what was planted. Now, that is the yes of the problem with our food production system or food supply system. And recently, Mangu, local government in Plateau, was attacked, and that affected maize production. And during that period was when Teller maize was released. I mean, does that, we're not stating absolutes, but we are trying to pinpoint dots that anyone who cares will begin to try to connect them. It's just a deductive reasoning thing. Yes. Now, the next challenge is, food production has gone low. That's one. And there is this talk about climate change. There is something about climate change that is said to affect food production. It's not just food production it affects. But I'd like to clarify that climate has ever been changing from evolution. Climate has never been a static phenomenon. Climate change has always been with us. And that is also part of what synergistically informs evolution. Species, according to what we learned in traditional biology, species evolve over time. And these are the attributes, these are the inputs that inform evolution. But now, that in a way affects food production. But I think, and from empirical observations we have on the field, for example, when you have 800,000 farmers in Benue State living in IDP camps for 8 to 10 years, wouldn't that affect food production, considering that Benue was and has been a major feeder to the Nigerian food supply system? The same thing happens to Plateau, Nasarawa, Taraba, Jigawa. You remember you know about the Hadejia Basin? Now, interestingly, we think that these are issues that could be handled, not to go and begin to bring higher yielding crops to introduce that will promote monocropping and affect negatively the natural agroecology, the diversification of crops and plants. But before we go on, there is also something I'd like us to look at. You see, in this context, we are discussing about food scarcity, food shortages, and higher yield. Also comes an analogous context or concept of food sovereignty. He who controls your food controls your life.
Yeah, Prof, I was coming there.
Okay.
I was coming there. And you want to land on that thought because I remember a doctor, one of our friends called Aproko Doctor. He said that I'm going to posit two things to ask my question. First, he said, the whole idea of breakfast is the most important meal is not from doctors, it's from a cereal company advertising.
Yeah.
President Bola Tinubu, during the high-level meeting on counterterrorism, I would read the words he used in that meeting. Look at the illegal mining that plagues so many of our nations today. Those who think illegal mining has no connection with financing terrorism are sorely mistaken. The international community has both the moral and legal obligation to help this cause because it is external finance, talking about foreign money. Now, I posited these two to say that, are you suggesting, by your last thought, that this is another form of economic neocolonialism?
Absolutely. You see, number one, the seeds that we traditionally use are not patented. I plant, I harvest, I reserve some, I replant the next season. But here is a new hegemony that is coming, and we need, as patriotic Nigerians, we need to educate ourselves that, first of all, this high yield, we have results in the field as scientists, that these so-called touted high yields are not reproducible. That means you plant and you get 8 tons per hectare this year, this planting season. Next season, you cannot replant that for 2 reasons. Firstly, the company that owns the patent will forbid you from doing that. We've seen it happen in India.
I'm sorry, so you cannot keep them, dry them, and
No. The licensing forbids that. The licensing forbids that. That means you are tethered to the producer of those seeds, that every season you go back to buy them. And you know what that means. I don't need to overflog it. It means...
You know, the natural question on our minds, is the government aware of all this? I think that's what we can end on that.
We don't think government is not aware of all this in absolute terms. That is why this education is needful.
But we now have a biotechnology agency, if government is aware of all of these dangers.
Let me tell you something about research. That biotechnology agency is a research agency, a regulatory agency. There is something in research that we call conflict of interest. You must have heard or read about it.
Yeah, we know about it.
Now, there's something very important, very, very important with research, which is called funding. Right. He who funds research determines the outcome of the research. Now, if you look at systematically, it's a sing-song. It's taken for granted that ASU and federal government always have altercations. Right. Over what? Funding. Funding. So research has been systematically underfunded or not funded, and now exposing us researchers to those people who have the money to fund. And there is no free funding anywhere.
He who pays the piper dictates the tune.
Absolutely.
Prof, this has been a very interesting one. Clearly not the end of the conversation, but we have to anchor at this point. Well, Professor Christopher Amwa, Executive Director, Center for Food Safety and Agricultural Research.